Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take the most dense, specialized knowledge, the source codes, the regulatory volumes, and we try to strip them down to the most critical and, honestly, often surprising nuggets of insight.
Today, we are putting on our white gloves and sort of inspecting our bearing. We're about to embark on a really meticulous deep dive into the world of military protocol, custom, and ceremony.
Yeah, and this isn't just about general manners or being polite.
No, not at all. This is about an institutional language. It's a regulatory framework that dictates, well, everything, from who sits where at a high-level meeting to the exact procedure for honoring the deceased.
That's exactly right. And our source material for this isn't just one book of etiquette. It's a whole stack of official binding regulations from really across the Department of Defense. We're talking about the specific language you find in U.S. Air Force, Army, and Navy instructions. Things like the AFIs and DAFIs 34-1201, the Army's AR 625, and the Navy's OPNEV 1710.12 and NTP 13B.
And these documents, they're really the ultimate distillation of hierarchy, respect, and tradition. They show you exactly how these massive organizations maintain order and dignity in, every scenario you can imagine, just by standardizing how people interact.
So what's the mission for you, our listener? It's to gain, a comprehensive and structured understanding of this world. We want to pull out that detailed, kind of unwritten script that governs everything from how a flag is handled to the precise choreography of, say, the Secretary of Defense arriving at an installation.
Yeah.
We're looking for the rules that, they might seem arcane, but they ensure flawless operation when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
Essentially, we are learning the grammar and the vocabulary of professionalism inside the Department of Defense.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we have to start with the code of the flag. It's the absolute core of military symbolism, where the rules are, well, they're sacred and they're unyielding.
They really are.
So when the military talks about the U.S. flag, and the regulations call it the national color, every single choice about how it's displayed is a conscious act of precedence. The first and most vital principle is what they call the position of honor. How do the regulations define that?
The position of honor is, well, it's sacred, and its definition can shift a bit depending on the context of the display. But the core rule is always the same. The national color has to be superior to all other flags.
Okay, so how does that work in, say, a parade?
Let's look at a procession. When the flag is carried in a line of flags, it must be either on the marching right, so that's the flag bearer's own right.
Gotcha.
Or if you have a bunch of flags and the U.S. flag is in the center, it has to be carried in front of the center line of the other flags.
So it's always visually leading.
Always. That visual primacy is, well, it's completely non-negotiable.
And what about when flags are displayed stationary, like against a wall inside a building? I see that all the time.
Right. So if the U.S. flag is displayed against a wall with crossed staffs next to another flag, like a state flag or a service flag, the U.S. flag must be positioned on its own right.
Which means for us looking at it, it's on our left.
Exactly. From the observer's perspective, it's on the left. And here's the crucial detail. To maintain its physical superiority, the U.S. flag's staff has to be visually in front of the other flag's staff.
So it's literally layered on top.
Precisely. It ensures no other staff is perceived as supporting or, dominating the national color.
That makes sense. I know if the U.S. flag is in a big line of flags, maybe state flags or allied flags, just putting in the middle isn't enough, is it?
No, you're exactly right. If you're displaying a large array and you put the U.S. flag in the center of the row, the regulation is very, very clear on this. That center staff must be visibly taller or displayed at a higher level than all the other staff.
And if they're all the same height.
Then the U.S. flag has to be placed all the way to the observer's left. The point is that insistence on elevation or leftward placement reinforces that the position of honor is maintained even if it's geographically in the center.
Okay, now for probably the most famous rule about flag handling, one that even civilians know.
Yeah.
The prohibition on dipping.
Yes, and it is an absolute mandate. The U.S. flag will never be dipped to any person or anything. It doesn't matter if it's a head of state, another national flag, a ship at sea. It just doesn't happen.
It symbolizes that the nation bows to no one.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
But the regulations immediately contrast this absolute rule with what subordinate flags must do.
And that's the key, right? It defines the hierarchy.
It's the entire point. While the national color never dips, regimental colors, state flags, organizational flags like for the Department of the Air Force or the Army, they are always dipped as a mark of respect to the U.S. flag.
I see.
They also dip when they're rendering honors to, say, The Secretary of the Service, the Chief of Staff, or equivalent high-ranking officials during a ceremony like a pass and review, the deference just flows up the chain.
The Navy, though, has one very specific, almost legendary exception to this rule.
It does, and it's a brilliant reflection of both operational and spiritual reality. The Navy sources permit one single exception where a pennant is allowed to be flown above the U.S. flag.
And what is that?
It's the church or Jewish worship pennant. This is only authorized during church services conducted by naval chaplains, and crucially, it has to happen at sea.
At sea. Why is that part so important?
Well, it speaks to the unique, isolated environment of a ship. You know, on land, the national color is always supreme, but in the demanding, sometimes existential reality of being at sea for long periods where people are far from home and under extreme stress.
Right.
The regulations acknowledge that for a moment, spiritual solace can temporarily override even the most sacred national protocol. It's really a testament to supporting the crew's emotional and moral foundation.
That's fascinating. Okay, shifting gears to a public display of grief. Flying the flag at half-staff. The procedure itself is not as simple as just hauling it halfway up the pole.
That's a really common misconception. The regulations mandate a very precise sequence to show maximum respect. When the U.S. flag is going to be flown at half-staff, it first has to be hoisted momentarily all the way to the peak of the staff.
To the very top.
To the very top, what's called the truck. Only then is it slowly lowered to the half-staff position, which is defined as 1/2 the distance between the top and bottom of the staff.
And what happens at the end of the day before it's fully lowered?
The procedure is reversed. Before the flag is lowered for retreat or for the day, it must be raised back up to the peak again, and only then is it fully lowered and retrieved.
So it's peak, down to half, back to peak, then all the way down.
Exactly. That continuous motion ensures that the nation, even in grief, never allows the flag to be treated casually.
Now, what about when other flags are displayed with it? If the U.S. flag is at half-staff, all the other flags have to follow suit, but foreign flags don't. Why is that exception there?
Yeah, that goes back to international law and protocol. The flag of one nation should never be displayed above or below that of another nation in peacetime. It's a sign of sovereignty.
Okay.
So to fly a foreign flag at half-staff on U.S. soil would be, well, it would be a breach of international courtesy. It would imply they are subordinate to our grief. So when our flag is lowered, foreign national flags nearby are kept at full staff to avoid that implication. It's about equal treatment between sovereign nations.
The rules for how long the flag is half-staffed are also surprisingly specific. It's all based on the deceased's former position.
This is where the regulations really codify a kind of grief hierarchy. For a president or a former president, it's 7 days from the date of death.
Within days.
Right. But for a cabinet member, like the Secretary of Defense or a service secretary, the flag is at half-staff from the day of death until interment, or for 7 days, whichever is shorter.
So there's a cap on it.
There is. And if the interment happens after that period, the flag has to be displayed at half-staff again, specifically on the day of the interment. It's incredibly detailed.
It seems like it ensures that even memorialization is standardized across the entire DoD. And do local commanders have any discretion here?
They do, but it's limited. The DAF regulations, for example, they authorize installation commanders to direct flags to half-staff for occasions they think are appropriate. This usually includes the death of a current active or reserve commander within their own command.
So it allows for recognizing significant local loss while still staying inside the broader national template.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move to what happens when flags are no longer fit for display. The unserviceable flags.
Right. Unserviceable flags must be treated with the utmost dignity. The regulation is explicit. You can never use them as banners, for advertising, or just cast them aside.
So what's the proper way?
When a flag is damaged or worn out, it should be destroyed in a dignified manner, and the preferred method is by burning. The key is that the method has to be respectful and not show any irreverence to the flag as a symbol of the nation.
Now, for a fascinating detail I never would have thought about. The ornaments at the top of the flagstaff, the finials, they seem to instantly identify the flag's purpose or service.
They absolutely do, and they are incredibly specific. For instance, the eagle finial, that's the highest of them all, and it is authorized only for presidential flagstaffs.
So when you see an eagle, you know it's connected to the commander-in-chief.
Immediately. And the other services have their own. The Army strictly uses the spearhead. That is the only device you'll see on Army flags. And the Navy also uses it for their guidons.
And the Air Force.
The Air Force and the Space Force both use the spade, which is silver in color. That's their primary finial. The Navy is the most diverse. They use a battle axe to top the flagstaff for the Navy flag and battalion colors, but they use an eight-horn for personal flags and command pennants you see on Navy cars.
Wow, so there's a whole visual language right there at the top of the pole.
It is. It allows for quick identification even if the flag itself is furled or obscured.
The most solemn application of all this is, of course, casket draping. I think we all recognize the triangular fold, but the initial placement on a closed casket is defined by the deceased's left shoulder.
Yes. The regulation specifies that when you're covering a closed casket, the flag is placed lengthwise, with the Union, that's the blue field of stars, at the head and positioned specifically over the left shoulder of the deceased.
And the symbolism there.
It ensures that the symbol of the nation is guarding the heart and the service of the veteran. It's a very powerful placement.
And what are the crucial rules for handling it during the burial itself?
Two big ones. The flag is never lowered into the grave, and it is not allowed to touch the ground at any point. Furthermore, if a full couch casket is open for viewing, the flag has to be removed. It's then folded precisely into that triangular shape, the cocked hat fold, and it's either placed in the lid, just above the decedent's left shoulder, or held by a family member or an honor guard.
It ensures reverence while still accommodating the family's needs.
Correct.
Let's finish this section with the POW-MIA flag, which has a special mandatory position in all of this.
It really does. The inclusion of the POW-MIA flag in these regulations formalizes a very solemn national commitment. And it has two strict display mandates that manage its relationship with the U.S. flag.
What's the first one?
First, it must always be the last flag in any display, so it's positioned furthest to the right from the observer's perspective, unless Congress has mandated its display on one of the 6 specific national observances.
And the second rule, the one about half-staff status, is particularly nuanced.
It is. The POW-MIA flag shall not be displayed when the U.S. flag is at half-staff. The only exception is on those 6 mandatory display days. So, for example, if an installation commander half-staffs the U.S. flag for a local reason, like the death of a local commander, the POW-MIA flag has to be removed entirely.
Wow, so it has its own very specific set of rules.
It does. It maintains the unique dignity of that symbol while making sure it still adheres to the statutory requirements.
Okay, if flag protocol is about showing respect to the nation as a whole, then the concept of precedence is really about ensuring absolute clarity in the chain of authority. It feels like the invisible force that organizes the entire military world.
That's a great way to put it. Precedence fundamentally just means the right to proceed in order, rank, or importance. Its main function, its operational purpose, is to eliminate confusion. It's to avoid diplomatic or organizational embarrassment in formal settings.
So like at a high-level meeting with officials from 10 different agencies.
Exactly. Precedence settles who speaks first, who signs a document first, and who gets the seat at the center of the table. It's the ultimate organizational chart.
But, and this is what I found really surprising in the sources, there isn't one universal chart for everyone.
That is the crucial, surprising truth. There is no single official precedence list used by all federal agencies. The DoD and the DAF, they have to constantly compile and update their own lists based on multiple external guides, diplomatic resources, and specific DoD memos on precedents that are issued by the Secretary of Defense.
So if a base commander needs to host a luncheon with local politicians, some allied military attachés, and a few agency heads, they can't just pull out a universal list and be done with it.
Yeah, they have to build one based on the nature of that specific event. Local commanders will maintain their own separate lists for internal use, customizing them for seating charts, introductions, and so on. At the end of the day, the decision on who goes first is based on the purpose of the occasion and the best interests of the U.S. government.
Let's get into the weeds of how individuals are ranked. We can start with military rank and the status of retired officers.
Sure. Within the active duty force, it's pretty straightforward. Precedence is based on your rank and then your date of rank. The longer you've held that rank, the higher your precedence.
But the nuance comes with retired status.
It does. Retired officers rank with, but always after, active duty officers of the same rank.
That's a really profound distinction. It means an active major, even if they were just promoted yesterday, would rank ahead of a retired major who was promoted 5 years ago.
Exactly. Active service takes precedence over retired service at the same pay grade. Now, among retired officers of the same rank, their precedence is then determined by their date of rank upon retirement. The system always keeps the focus on the current operational chain of command.
The sources also carve out a specific honor for former high-ranking officers, like a former chief of staff of the Air Force, or CSF.
Yes, they're given what's called positional precedence. Former high-ranking officers are ranked ahead of other retired officers of the same rank simply because of the seniority of the office they held. The prestige of the position itself carries forward.
That makes sense.
And this honor even extends to the widowed spouses of former chiefs. They are ranked based on the seniority of the term of office held by their late spouse.
Now let's tackle a very interesting, almost bureaucratic concept, frocking. This is when you get to wear the next rank early, before you get the official pay and promotion. How does that translate into precedence?
Frocking is a huge honor. An officer who is frocked is immediately entitled to wear the insignia of that higher rank and receive all the honors and courtesies of that grade. So in a social or ceremonial setting, they are seated and given precedence ahead of others who are still in their actual pay grade.
So, if a captain is frocked to major, she gets treated like a major. But where does she sit relative to an officer who is already a full-fledged major?
Ah, that's the key. She is seated behind all individuals who actually hold the rank of major, regardless of their date of rank.
I see.
She's treated as a major, but only up to the level of the existing major population. And if you have multiple people who are frocked, their precedence among themselves is determined by the effective date of their frocking order. It's a system that lets the organization formally recognize a pending promotion while still respecting the existing paid hierarchy.
What about Medal of Honor recipients? These are national heroes. Does that decoration grant them some kind of standing precedence at every official event?
This is a point of frequent misunderstanding. Medal of Honor recipients do not have a standing codified precedence based on the medal itself. Their rank is determined by their current or former military rank.
So the medal doesn't automatically place them above a general or below a colonel or anything like that?
No. The only time that changes is when they are specifically being honored as the guest of honor at an event. In that specific context, they're given the highest spot. Otherwise, the medal is an incredible earned honor, but rank defines positional authority. It's a really interesting distinction.
It is. It shows the regulations prioritizing positional duty over a decoration when defining the chain of command.
Right.
A quick courtesy note on civilian protocol. What's the appropriate way to address the spouses of high-ranking officials?
The rule here is simple and is followed very strictly. Spouses of high-ranking officials, so the vice president, cabinet members, service secretaries, they do not share their spouse's official titles. They are simply addressed as Mr., Mrs., or Mrs., unless, of course, they hold an official position themselves.
So the courtesy is shown to the office holder, not automatically to the spouse.
Correct.
Let's move on to the rigid statutory order for organizational flags, the Joint Service Order. This hierarchy is mandatory whenever the services are displayed together.
This order is critical for things like parades and joint ceremonies, and it's largely based on the establishment date of the service and its purpose. When you organize a joint service color team, the Army holds the traditional honor of carrying the United States flag.
And the sequence of the other flags starts with the academies, recognizing the training pipeline.
It does. It follows this precise list. Cadets, U.S. Military Academy. That's Army, followed by midshipmen from the U.S. Naval Academy, then cadets, U.S. Air Force Academy, and finally, cadets from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in peacetime.
And then the main military services follow that.
Yes. The order is U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, and the U.S. Space Force. The Coast Guard follows the Space Force in peacetime.
You keep mentioning the peacetime exception for the Coast Guard. How does that change in wartime?
This is a classic example of operational precedence overriding statutory status. In times of war, when the Coast Guard operates under the authority of the Department of the Navy, its service flag and its training organizations automatically take precedence right after the Navy's equivalents.
So it reflects the reality of the operational command structure at that moment.
Exactly. It's all about who you're working for.
Finally, let's briefly touch upon positional and personal colors. These are the flags that signify the authority of senior leadership.
Right. Positional flags are for senior civilian and military officials, the Secretary of the Air Force, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. These have specific designs that are codified in the regulations. For example, the SECAF flag is blue with the Air Force coat of arms and 5 pointed white stars in the corners, which symbolizes the Secretary's rank.
And general officer flags, or what they call personal colors.
Those are usually 3 feet by 4 feet, trimmed with yellow fringe, and they're for general officers and senior executive service members. They display the appropriate number of stars for the GGO's grade. It's basically the mobile, visual representation of that leader's authority.
If a general retires, What happens to that personal flag? It's so symbolic.
They can actually retain their personal colors when they separate or retire. However, the public display of a retired brigand's flag is regulated. It's prohibited unless they are officiating or being honored at an official military ceremony.
I see.
This rule prevents the flag from being, co-opted for non-official or commercial use. It maintains its dignity. They can, of course, display it privately in their home.
Okay, we're moving from organizational structure to daily interaction. And the absolute most fundamental military courtesy is the hand salute. It seems straightforward, but the regulations govern its exchange in such minute detail to make sure it's a meaningful act of respect, not just a casual wave.
It's the required greeting between uniformed personnel. The key regulatory points are initiation and timing. The junior member always initiates the salute. And this exchange has to be accompanied by an appropriate verbal greeting like, "Good morning, sir," or "Good morning, ma'am."
And timing is critical too, you said.
Yeah, it is. The salute should be offered early enough to allow the senior time to fully return it and extend their own verbal greeting before you pass each other. The regulations really emphasize that it has to be a visible, timely exchange of respect. It shows recognition and deference.
So when are you allowed to skip the salute? There have to be exceptions.
There are, and they're pretty common sense.
Mm-hmm.
When your arms are encumbered, meaning you're carrying something that makes saluting physically impossible, or if it interferes with your official duties, or is just obviously impractical.
Like if you're operating heavy machinery.
Exactly. But even if the salute is excused, a verbal greeting should still be extended. The goal is always to maximize respect without compromising safety or duty.
The handling of taps, that famous 24-note call it, distinguishes between its administrative use and its ceremonial use.
This is a vital distinction. Historically, taps signaled lights out, or the end of the day. If taps is played solely for that, for lights out, saluting is not required. It's just an auditory signal.
But at a funeral?
At a funeral, a memorial, a wreath laying, any formal military ceremony, it transitions into a sign of deep respect for the fallen. In that instance, uniformed personnel who are outdoors must salute at the very first note and hold that position rigidly until the last note is finished.
And what's the expectation for a civilian attending a ceremony like that when taps is played?
Civilians during ceremonial taps are expected to remove any non-religious headdress and place their right hand over their heart. It's just the appropriate mark of respect and solemnity for the occasion.
Beyond the salute, there are rules governing movement and space, which are codified in the rule that the junior always walks or rides to the left of the senior. Why left side specifically?
This is rooted in tradition and operational deference. The junior member walks or rides to the left of the senior official they're accompanying. The reasoning is twofold. First, it gives the senior person the position of honor, the right side. Second, and this is the operational part, it ensures the senior is always free to meet and engage the next person without being obstructed. The junior is positioned just slightly subserviently to maximize the senior's freedom of movement.
And when does a junior have to immediately snap to attention in a shared space?
There are a few specific scenarios. When they are addressed directly by a senior official, or when a general or flag officer, the commanding officer, or an officer making an official inspection enters the room, it's a visual cue of deference for the authority entering that space.
Even the process of an introduction is governed by precedence.
Correct. When you're introducing two people, the rule of thumb is to always mention the honored or senior person first. The junior person is introduced to the senior person.
So you'd say, General Smith, I'd like to introduce Captain Jones.
Exactly. General Smith, I would like to introduce Captain John Jones, who is managing our new weapons program. You give a little bit of info about the junior to help the conversation, but the senior's name must be spoken first.
Let's talk transportation protocol. Specifically, moving personnel on aircraft or vehicles, which uses an inverse logic for getting on.
This is a brilliant example of prioritizing the operational chain of command. Officers enter aircraft and other transportation in inverse order of rank. The most junior officer gets on first.
Why inverse for entry?
It ensures that the senior officer is the last one to step aboard. It symbolizes that the unit is ready to go and is waiting only for the commander. Conversely, they get off in strict order of rank, with the senior officer departing first.
So the senior is the first person seen upon arrival.
Right, ready to be greeted. And it also ensures they're always given the more desirable seats inside the vehicle or aircraft.
What are the rules around spouses traveling on military assets? spacey travel and all that.
Spouse-independent travel is heavily regulated. Spouses are generally not considered representatives of the U.S. government or the service, except when they're traveling on an approved invitational travel authorization, or ITA. If spouse travel by air is authorized via an ITA, then staff car support is also valid. But without an ITA, fare-free transportation on a government vehicle for a service member who is on temporary duty is not authorized for the spouse. This is all about protecting government assets for official business only.
That's a very clear line. Lastly, the regulation of automobile flags, which you often see in motorcades, especially for officials from other departments.
The DAF sources clarify that Air and Space Force units generally don't use automobile flags. But for officials of other departments, these flags, usually 12 by 18 inches, are authorized on government vehicles. And the placement is critical.
So.
The flag should fly about 1 inch higher than the crest of the car's hood, and it should be displayed on the left front fender when you're viewing an approaching car. This placement gives the flag the position of honor relative to the vehicle's direction of travel.
We're moving now to the highest levels of choreography, managing ceremonies and distinguished visitor or DV logistics. And interestingly, the regulations often start this section by advocating for less ceremony.
That's right. It's the mandate of economy and efficiency applied to protocol. Formal ceremonies, parades, honor cordons, elaborate motorcades, these things consume a lot of personnel time and equipment, so they must be held to an absolute minimum when officials visit field installations.
So if a base commander has a high-ranking official visiting, they're actually encouraged to keep the fuss to a minimum.
Absolutely. Full honors are generally reserved only for the highest-ranking statutory appointees, general or flag officers, foreign dignitaries, or on occasions where the ceremony genuinely promotes international goodwill or morale.
So it has to have a purpose.
It has to have a useful strategic purpose beyond just courtesy, and officials who are entitled to honors are actively encouraged to decline them. The commander ultimately has the prerogative to simplify or even eliminate the honors.
The DV arrival on the flight line is maybe the most visible and tightly choreographed event in all of military protocol. Let's walk through the preparation for that.
The DV flight line arrival is it's a masterpiece of logistics. It's designed to be smooth, safe, and dignified. Before the aircraft even touches down, the protocol team has to confirm the right parking spot, the exact aircraft type, the tail number, and critically, its serviceability. Everything has to be confirmed before anyone steps out.
And when the aircraft approaches, the greeting party has to be positioned just so.
Yes. The greeting party stands in a line facing the door side of the aircraft, and precedence dictates their placement. The senior-ranking individual stands to the far right, facing the aircraft. If spouses are present, they stand immediately to the left of their principal.
This places the most important greeter closest to the side of honor.
That's the idea. And as the aircraft approaches its final parking spot, the senior greeter commands, "Present arms." This salute is held until the aircraft stops moving, and then the command "Order arms" is given.
And what about the exception for civilian DVs?
If the DV is a civilian, no salute is required by the greeting party. The only exception is if the civilian is the President or the Vice President of the United States. As Commander-in-Chief, they always receive the full military salute.
The vehicle movement on the flight line is subject to some extremely strict safety rules to prevent FOD, foreign object damage.
Safety always overrides protocol here. DV transportation vehicles are only moved into place after the aircraft engines are cut off and the wheels are chocked. No vehicles are allowed near an active running aircraft.
And the specific placement of the vehicle for loading, that seemed tricky.
It is. The rules mandate a kind of dual compliance. When you're driving across the yellow flight lines, the driver's side should be nearest to the aircraft. That minimizes how far you intrude into the operational area.
But for loading?
For the loading process itself, the passenger side of the car has to be closest to the aircraft door because the senior official needs that passenger door to be easily accessible. And because of how tight everything is on a flight line, a spotter is required anytime a vehicle is backing up.
And once the DV is loaded, what dictates the motorcade formation?
Precedence is reasserted. The vehicle transporting the senior-ranking DV will always be in the lead position. And inside the vehicle itself, the senior officials are always given the best seats, typically the right rear seat.
Let's shift to internal unit ceremonies. Promotions, retirements, awards. Who is actually authorized to officiate these key life events?
The officiating official has to be the first appropriate individual in the honoree's chain of command. This can be an officer or a senior civilian, But the crucial part is, the official must be higher in grade than the honoree. This maintains the authority and the dignity of the ceremony.
I understand the regulations are explicit that enlisted members cannot officiate these ceremonies. Why is that specific prohibition in place?
The regulations state it is not appropriate for enlisted members to officiate ceremonies like promotions or retirements. The thinking is that these ceremonies relate to the establishment or termination of commissioned authority or giving awards that stem from that authority.
So it's a legal authority thing.
It is. The official act of commissioning or promoting involves an authority that traditionally is administered by officers who hold their commissions from the president. Enlisted leaders, of course, lead and mentor, but the formal act of officiating these permanent changes in status rests with the officer or senior civilian echelon.
What about the physical requirement for a re-enlistment oath?
This is a nod to legal reality. For reenlistment ceremonies, the officer administering the oath and the person reenlisting must be physically collocated during the oath.
You can't do it over a video call.
No. You cannot legally administer the oath remotely. That physical presence underscores the solemn, legal, contractual nature of the commitment to service.
Okay, let's tackle the thorny issue of funding for official functions and social events. Distinguishing between official government money and private money seems critical for anyone organizing an event.
This is often the most confusing area for people on an installation. You have to clearly distinguish between appropriated funds, or APF, which is government money, and non-appropriated funds, NAF, or just personal funds.
And what are some examples of expenses that APF, the government money, can cover for a protocol event?
APF funds can be used for things that directly support the mission. So official announcements, place cards, renting a venue, and travel for essential support personnel. But, and this is the big but, APF cannot be used to buy gifts, personal refreshments, or food for military members or civilians unless it's specifically authorized by law, which is almost never the case for a social event.
So when government funds can't be used for things like meals, how do event organizers legally cover those costs?
When APFs aren't authorized, the proper source of funding is the individual, or what's called a unit unofficial activity, or UUA. These are personal funds collected by the event organizers. You might hear them called landing fees or hospitality fees.
Right.
Legally, these collections are processed as a UUA, which operates under the commander's direction, but uses funds raised through private contribution. It's a strict separation to prevent any misuse of taxpayer money.
This means if an event includes meals, drinks, or any non-mandated entertainment, it almost always has to be paid for with private funding.
Almost always, yes. The regulations mandate that functions considered primarily social, rather than strictly official, must rely on NAF or personal funds to cover costs like catering, entertainment, and decorations.
Finally, let's quickly clarify the purpose and attendance rules for the two main formal military dinner types, the dining in versus the dining out.
The formats are similar. They're both formal ceremonial dinners, but the guest lists are distinct. A dining in is designed to promote camaraderie and esprit de corps, and it includes only members of a wing, organization, or unit, no spouses or outside guests.
And a dining out?
A dining out is the ceremonial dinner that includes spouses and guests. Both typically require the formal dress uniform for military attendees and formal attire for civilians, and they adhere to very strict rules of conduct throughout the evening.
This entire system, from the geometry of cross flags to the complex funding rules for a formal dinner, it really demonstrates a world where nothing is left to chance.
It absolutely does. These detailed codes, from the exact size of a flag streamer to the inverse order of getting off an airplane, they serve a purpose that's far deeper than just being polite. They standardize behavior, they minimize confusion, and they maximize respect in what is an inherently hierarchical and often dangerous environment. This whole system is the indispensable infrastructure that institutionalizes professionalism and dignity, even when you're dealing with the smallest details.
What's so fascinating here, and what our deep dive really revealed, is that adhering to this almost intimidatingly strict set of rules isn't about arbitrary bureaucracy. It is the infrastructure for handling every possible scenario, from a private introduction to a head of state arrival, ensuring that these protocols hold up under the highest possible level of scrutiny and stress.
Which leads directly to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. The adherence to these intricate, centuries-old customs and courtesies, especially in a modern, high-tech fighting force, it raises a question. Are these protocols merely tradition for tradition's sake, Or are they a fundamental, indispensable tool for maintaining the clarity, the discipline, and the emotional cohesion that's necessary for organizations where mistakes are simply not permitted?
A reflection on whether these rules are relics of the past or crucial safeguards for the future.
Exactly.
That's a powerful and operational question to consider the next time you see a ceremonial guard or a flag being raised. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the meticulously governed world of military protocol. We'll see you next time.